To this point, I've aimed to illustrate that you, like a scientist, are constantly interpreting your world through your own unique framework of ideas and beliefs. These personal constructs provide a sense of stability and self-understanding as you navigate new experiences, relationships, and moments of self-discovery. These constructs are not fixed, they are constantly being revised, granting you varying degrees of adaptability when facing new challenges. Building on the previous chapter's exploration of stable personality traits, we now turn to a perspective that challenges this notion and examines the more adaptable aspects of our personalities, specifically free traits. Mutable selves, mythic traits? I recall an experience when delivering a keynote address in Arizona where a familiar shift occurred. I consciously transitioned from my naturally introverted personality to a markedly different persona. At that early hour, a modulated, soft-spoken, and tentative approach wouldn't resonate, especially after the previous night's festivities. Even the introverts in the audience needed something to elevate their energy and engagement. Therefore, someone observing my presentation early on might have described me as an enthusiastic extrovert. However, I knew better, or so I thought. Professor Sam Gosling at the University of Texas once described one of his colleagues, raising a similar question. When others perceive you differently than you perceive yourself, it could indicate a blind spot where you lack self-awareness. However, it might also signify a personal spot where your self-perception is more accurate than others' perceptions. He cited Brian Little, a Harvard professor known for his legendary personality psychology course, as an example. According to those who witnessed his lectures, he was eloquent, engaging, and brimming with energy. As a result, his students widely regarded him as a quintessential extrovert. Yet, Little himself disagreed, insisting that his behavior was a deliberate act performed to be an effective teacher. Should we believe him? Is it possible that his extroversion is merely a blind spot? Could I be blind to my own extroversion? Perhaps. However, Sam, a close friend, elaborated in his article, suggesting that aspects of my personality might explain why my students and audiences easily misinterpret me. I am not alone in this. Many of us sometimes behave in ways that lead others to incorrectly infer certain fixed or stable personality traits. Psychologists refer to this as counter-dispositional behavior. I have developed a theory about why and how people engage in such behavior and its significant impact on our well-being. The core argument is this: human personality has both internal and external dimensions. The internal dimension encompasses our intentions and the personal projects we pursue. The external dimension involves the images we consciously or unconsciously project to others. Our personalities are constructed, challenged, and reconstructed within the interplay between these two dimensions. Exploring this nexus reveals a spectrum of unusual behaviors. For instance, neurotics may unwittingly reveal their anxiety while trying to appear composed, or a genuinely kind person might act aggressively due to a past emotional wound. Similarly, an introverted Harvard lecturer may adopt a pseudo-extroverted persona while teaching. But, as Gosling points out, this same lecturer might retreat to a quiet space after class to decompress. What drives these behaviors, and why are they important to our well-being? In the previous chapter, we discussed how stable personality traits are linked to happiness, health, and accomplishments, essential components of well-being. Therefore, it's logical to conclude that stable individual differences in personality are real and consequential. Yet, some may remain skeptical. Does personality not depend heavily on the situation? Is context not crucial? Is the idea of stable personality traits simply a myth? The answer to each is yes, albeit with important qualifications. Naturally, we tend to be more extroverted at a party than at a funeral and more conscientious while working on our taxes than while texting friends. Trait theory acknowledges this. The average expression of traits varies across situations. However, the relative stability of trait expression, or how you compare to others on a specific trait in a given situation, remains remarkably consistent. The class clown in elementary school may exhibit less mischievousness 30 years later, just as most classmates may have lowered their overall extroversion. Yet, at the class reunion, they are still the clown, a more refined and mature version, but still an exceptionally extroverted presence. While everyone might lean towards extroversion at a party, a genuine extrovert is likely to be exceptionally outgoing and perhaps, from an introvert's viewpoint, borderline obnoxious. Introverts, in contrast, would display a more tempered extroversion, outgoing but not exuberant. The most introverted among them might simply decline the invitation altogether. However, you might have different concerns about trait theory. You might concede that personality traits have some predictable aspects and that behaviors generally align with the concept of relatively stable and enduring traits. But, you might ask, are there not times when people act in ways completely contrary to their fundamental nature? What about the introvert who is not just mildly extrovert at a party but truly shines? Or the exceptionally disagreeable person who displays remarkable kindness and sweetness over Thanksgiving, leaving their family puzzled? Let's examine these examples more closely. Marcus is the extrovert introvert, and Stephanie is the sweet and sour publisher, each bearing a striking resemblance to individuals I have known for years. Marcus is a complex individual, renowned in Montreal's indie music scene as a bon vivant, thrill-seeker, and irrepressible extrovert. As both a musician and an impresario, he is dependable for enlivening any gathering. His arrival sets the atmosphere abuzz. Yet, there is another side to Marcus, one who frequently escapes the spotlight, seeks solitude, and immerses himself in serious philosophy books, behaving like a true introvert. After a lively night in Old Town Montreal, he can be found alone in the back alleys, drained and seeking respite. Who is the real Marcus? Stephanie is an intimidating figure. Her colleagues in Manhattan's publishing industry describe her as tough, acerbic, and decidedly disagreeable. She acknowledges and even takes some pride in this portrayal. However, there have also been instances where she has acted in ways conflicting with her reputation, displays of kindness and tenderness seemingly out of character, such as her behavior during Thanksgiving. Who is the real Stephanie? 3 avenues to natural behavior. Biogenic influences. Our everyday actions can be viewed as stemming from 3 distinct motivational sources. The first of these is biogenic, meaning it has roots in our genetic makeup. Its influence arises from brain structures and processes, an area actively explored by the burgeoning field of personality neuroscience. These biogenic motives manifest as the innate dispositions and temperaments that individuals, like Marcus or Stephanie, possess from birth. These personality traits can even be observed in newborns. For example, when exposed to a sudden loud noise, some infants will turn towards the sound, while others will turn away. Those who are drawn to the noise tend to develop into extroverts, while those who turn away are more likely to become introverts. One intriguing method for informally assessing extroversion at the biogenic level is the lemon drop test. While variations exist, the procedure described here is adapted from a demonstration I often used with my undergraduate students. You will need the following: an eyedropper, a cotton swab with cotton on both ends, thread, concentrated lemon juice, regular lemon juice is less effective, and a willing volunteer. Attach the thread to the center of the cotton swab so it hangs horizontally. Instruct the volunteer to swallow 4 times, then place one end of the swab on their tongue for 20 seconds. Next, place 5 drops of concentrated lemon juice on their tongue. After they swallow, have them place the other end of the swab on the same area of the tongue for another 20 seconds. Finally, hold the swab up by the thread. In some individuals, the swab will remain horizontal. In others, the lemon juice end will dip downwards. Can you predict which outcome corresponds to which personality type? In extroverts, the swab tends to stay relatively horizontal, whereas in introverts, it dips. This is because introverts, who generally have higher baseline arousal levels, exhibit a stronger response to intense stimuli like lemon juice, resulting in increased saliva production. Extroverts, being less sensitive to strong stimulation, tend to have drier mouths. There's even evidence suggesting that this lower salivation rate contributes to higher rates of tooth decay in extroverts compared to introverts. I have personally conducted this test on myself numerous times, and the swab invariably dips significantly, suggesting I am, at least by this indicator, a biogenic introvert. I also imagine that Marcus would produce ample saliva, right on cue. Each of the big 5 personality dimensions can be examined through the lens of its biogenic origins. For instance, growing evidence suggests that highly agreeable individuals have elevated levels of oxytocin, a neuropeptide released during childbirth, breastfeeding, orgasm, and other intimate interactions. Oxytocin levels can be measured through blood or saliva tests, and considerable research is currently focused on the gene responsible for regulating oxytocin. Consider a fascinating recent study by Alex Kogan and his colleagues. Couples were invited to a Berkeley laboratory to discuss concerns or distress with their partners, and these discussions were recorded. Participants were also evaluated for the presence of a specific variant of the gene that controls oxytocin expression. Strangers were then shown brief, 20-second clips from the recordings and asked to rate the participants' attentiveness and sympathy when listening to their partners. Participants with the oxytocin gene variant were significantly more likely to be rated as displaying sympathetic and agreeable traits. Therefore, we might reasonably expect that the biogenically disagreeable Stephanie would appear cold and unresponsive while listening to her ex-husband's recurring problems. Furthermore, she would likely demonstrate a lack of warmth and compliance if asked to provide a saliva sample for oxytocin gene variant testing. Acting in ways directly shaped by these biogenic factors can legitimately be deemed a natural response. It seems sensible to suggest that biogenic extroverts and individuals prone to unpleasantness are behaving naturally when they express their extroversion or unpleasantness. However, this represents only one avenue through which we can behave naturally. Sociogenic influences. Our behavior is significantly shaped by sociogenic factors acquired through socialization and the internalization of cultural codes, norms, and expectations. Actions rooted in sociogenic sources often feel natural and effortless because they've been reinforced throughout life as appropriate responses in various situations. Introversion and extroversion, for example, have both biogenic and sociogenic components. Cultures differ in the value and acceptance they place on extrovert behavior. American culture, for instance, highly values extroversion, a bias explored in Susan Cain's Quiet, which advocates for a broader understanding of personality development that integrates biogenic and sociogenic influences. Conversely, some Asian cultures prioritize introversion, encouraging children to blend in rather than stand out. This emphasis on conformity can be perceived negatively from a Western perspective, potentially hindering individual expression. Such cultural norms can significantly impact intercultural communication. Imagine a negotiation scenario involving extrovert American negotiators and introverted Asian negotiators. Differing norms regarding posture, gestures, and self-expression can impede effective communication. Skilled negotiators recognize these challenges and participate in workshops to learn how to interact effectively with individuals from diverse cultures. Both American and Asian negotiators might learn to adapt their behavior to mirror the other culture, potentially leading to awkward interactions characterized by goodwill mixed with confusion. Similar cultural variations exist for other personality traits like agreeableness and conscientiousness. Some cultures normalize complaining, while others emphasize resilience and civility. Some cultures prioritize goal attainment, while others value relaxation and enjoyment. These sociogenic aspects of our behavior can feel just as innate as our biogenic tendencies, highlighting the profound impact of culture. Adhering to cultural norms brings rewards, while deviating from them can incur social costs. Conflicts can arise between our biogenic tendencies and sociogenic expectations. For example, a biogenic predisposition to assertiveness might clash with a cultural norm of conformity or a parent's desire for their child to be less conspicuous. However, if the same assertive tendency is supported by a family that encourages boldness, it is more likely to be celebrated than criticized. Consider Stephanie and Marcus. Sociogenic influences help explain aspects of Stephanie's personality. She grew up in a culture that values assertiveness, which reinforced her biogenic tendency towards disagreeableness. This explains why her seeming sweetness during the holidays seemed particularly unusual. Marcus's personality is also shaped by sociogenic factors. Adopted by a large, outgoing French-Canadian family, his upbringing contrasted with his biogenic introversion. Unlike Stephanie, Marcus had to integrate these conflicting influences into his personality development. Idiogenic sources of motivation, personal projects, and free traits. Beyond the influences of biogenic, biological, and sociogenic, social, sources of motivation, lies a third compelling influence on our daily behavior, ideogenic motives. These represent the individual's plans, aspirations, commitments, and personal projects that they pursue in their daily life, and their origin is unique and specific to the individual. While biogenic causes can explain behavior as the expression of inherent traits, and sociogenic causes can attribute behavior to social norms, ideogenic causes seek to understand the underlying reasons behind a person's engagement in a particular behavior pattern. For instance, what personal goal might motivate a restaurant patron to repeatedly return a steak? What aspiration fueled Marcus's behavior in Montreal that winter? What commitment might explain Stephanie's resistance to both her biological predispositions and social conditioning on a specific holiday evening? To explore these questions, we must delve into personal projects and introduce the concept of free traits. Personal projects make up the fabric of everyday existence, ranging from trivial tasks, such as letting the dog out, to the grandest life aspirations, like liberating a people. While chapters 9 and 10 will detail how personal projects directly affect our overall well-being, the current focus is on how engagement in meaningful projects can lead to behaviors that surprise both others and ourselves. Consider Stephanie, a generally unpleasant person with low agreeableness and a tendency for combative behavior. Her colleagues, friends, relatives, and even her ex-husband are accustomed to her abrasive demeanor. Therefore, her remarkably sweet behavior at Thanksgiving this year came as a surprise. Unbeknownst to her family, Stephanie was about to embark on a 3-year assignment in Australia, managing a new venture for her publisher. With limited opportunities to return to New York, she had been contemplating the upcoming birth of her first grandchild during her absence. She also reflected on her son-in-law and his family, who would be present at Thanksgiving, quiet, thoughtful, and kind individuals who she knew struggled to connect with her on festive occasions. After further contemplation, Stephanie resolved to alter her interactions with her family, vaguely formulating a personal project of being a more nurturing mom. This impelled her to act supportively and pleasantly. Observers unfamiliar with Stephanie might have rated her high on the Big Five trait of agreeableness at Thanksgiving. This type of behavior is what I term the enactment of a free trait, in contrast to relatively fixed traits. Marcus also exhibited free trait behavior driven by a personal project. Despite his introverted nature, Marcus harbored a strong desire to become a music producer. Initially, this was a natural fit, as he could immerse himself in music with little regard for his surroundings. However, upon discovering a talent for promoting gigs and producing indie records, he found himself increasingly engaged in demanding social commitments, often extending into the early hours of the morning. Few suspected he wasn't the irrepressible extrovert he appeared to be. Instead, he was a pseudo-extrovert, adopting a sociogenic script to advance a personal project that held deep significance for him, despite his introverted tendencies. Why do individuals engage in free trait behavior? There are numerous reasons, but two stand out: professionalism and love. Stephanie, despite her disagreeableness, held deep affection for her family, and by acting against type, she could express that love more effectively than if she simply defaulted to her inherent nature. Marcus, a consummate professional, recognized that engaging with and inspiring fellow musicians and their patrons was essential to his role. This professionalism drove him to regularly display extroverted behavior, even though his natural inclination was to withdraw into the background. This behavior defined him and sustained his reputation within the music community, the singular mark of Marcus. Ideogenic sources of motivation, personal projects, and free traits. Beyond the influences of biogenic or biological and sociogenic or social sources of motivation, lies a third compelling influence on our daily behavior: ideogenic motives. These represent the individual's plans, aspirations, commitments, and personal projects that they pursue in their daily life, and their origin is unique and specific to the individual. While biogenic causes can explain behavior as the expression of inherent traits, and sociogenic causes can attribute behavior to social norms, ideogenic causes seek to understand the underlying reasons behind a person's engagement in a particular behavior pattern. For instance, what personal goal might motivate a restaurant patron to repeatedly return a steak? What aspiration fueled Marcus's behavior in Montreal that winter? What commitment might explain Stephanie's resistance to both her biological predispositions and social conditioning on a specific holiday evening? To explore these questions, we must delve into personal projects and introduce the concept of free traits. Personal projects make up the fabric of everyday existence, ranging from trivial tasks, such as letting the dog out, to the grandest life aspirations, like liberating a people. While chapters 9 and 10 will detail how personal projects directly affect our overall well-being, the current focus is on how engagement in meaningful projects can lead to behaviors that surprise both others and ourselves. Consider Stephanie, a generally unpleasant person with low agreeableness and a tendency for combative behavior. Her colleagues, friends, relatives, and even her ex-husband are accustomed to her abrasive demeanor. Therefore, her remarkably sweet behavior at Thanksgiving this year came as a surprise. Unbeknownst to her family, Stephanie was about to embark on a 3-year assignment in Australia, managing a new venture for her publisher. With limited opportunities to return to New York, she had been contemplating the upcoming birth of her first grandchild during her absence. She also reflected on her son-in-law and his family, who would be present at Thanksgiving, quiet, thoughtful, and kind individuals who she knew struggled to connect with her on festive occasions. After further contemplation, Stephanie resolved to alter her interactions with her family, vaguely formulating a personal project of being a more nurturing mom. This impelled her to act supportively and pleasantly. Observers unfamiliar with Stephanie might have rated her high on the Big Five trait of agreeableness at Thanksgiving. This type of behavior is what I term the enactment of a free trait, in contrast to relatively fixed traits. Marcus also exhibited free trait behavior driven by a personal project. Despite his introverted nature, Marcus harbored a strong desire to become a music producer. Initially, this was a natural fit, as he could immerse himself in music with little regard for his surroundings. However, upon discovering a talent for promoting gigs and producing indie records, he found himself increasingly engaged in demanding social commitments, often extending into the early hours of the morning. Few suspected he wasn't the irrepressible extrovert he appeared to be. Instead, he was a pseudo-extrovert, adopting a sociogenic script to advance a personal project that held deep significance for him, despite his introverted tendencies. Why do individuals engage in free trait behavior? There are numerous reasons, but two stand out: professionalism and love. Stephanie, despite her disagreeableness, held deep affection for her family, and by acting against type, she could express that love more effectively than if she simply defaulted to her inherent nature. Marcus, a consummate professional, recognized that engaging with and inspiring fellow musicians and their patrons was essential to his role. This professionalism drove him to regularly display extroverted behavior, even though his natural inclination was to withdraw into the background. This behavior defined him and sustained his reputation within the music community, the singular mark of Marcus. Free trait dynamics: the costs and benefits of stepping outside ourselves. While adopting free traits can be advantageous, consistently acting against our inherent personality may incur psychological and physical costs, supported by research findings. The alignment between our innate traits and our environment significantly impacts our well-being. Optimal well-being arises when the environment offers the resources needed to pursue our personal goals. For instance, highly sociable individuals thrive when their projects involve substantial social interaction. Peter, a former student, provides a compelling example. Despite scoring extremely high on extroversion, he lived as a monk under a vow of silence before attending Oxford. This mismatch between his disposition and environment was unlikely to be sustainable. From a free trait perspective, his constant counter-dispositional behavior would have been draining. Fortunately, he later found fulfillment as an education professor, where his sociability could flourish. Therefore, the alignment of our natural tendencies with our daily contexts promotes performance and well-being, while a significant mismatch can be detrimental. Highly disagreeable individuals may excel as bill collectors but struggle as counselors, while those open to experience may find themselves more at home in certain neighborhoods of New York City than in suburban North Dakota. However, what if our environment fails to provide the resources needed to satisfy our disposition and facilitate our projects? We can either change our environment, as Peter did, or create micro-niches within it, although this may not always be feasible. Another option lies at the heart of free traits, modifying our personal style. A study exploring personality changes in students over 4 years of university found that they became increasingly disagreeable and less neurotic. This shift likely reflects adaptation to a competitive academic environment that values critical thinking and objective challenge. While some students may undergo deep personality changes, from a free trait perspective, these changes are more likely strategic enactments driven by goals like impressing professors or securing strong recommendations. This perspective also suggests that the greater the discrepancy between biogenic and free traits, the more challenging the transition becomes. Highly emotional and agreeable first-year students may find this shift more difficult than those already predisposed to being calm and critical. The ability to adapt to situational demands by suppressing our natural tendencies is highlighted in another study. Students were assessed during their first semester of college, and their personal projects were categorized. 2 major life tasks for first-semester students are academic success and social integration. The study revealed that success and well-being depend on the timing of these priorities. Students who focused solely on social or academic projects did not fare as well as those who initially prioritized social tasks before shifting to academics. Those who built social networks early on could later rely on them for support during demanding academic periods. The tendency to prioritize academic or social projects likely relates to personality traits such as conscientiousness and openness for academic tasks, and agreeableness and extroversion for social tasks. Therefore, gregarious students will thrive early on when establishing social networks but must suppress their extroversion when academic demands increase. We might find them late at night in the library, acting like introverts, missing their friends, but dedicated to their studies. Sucking it up, the price of pretending. Have you ever wondered if airline flight attendants seem less cheerful than they used to? For many years, airline training manuals instructed stewardesses, as they were then called, to control their emotions and maintain a specific image. A mandatory smile was part of the job. Regardless of their personal feelings, they were required to suck it up and present a cheerful facade, complete with specific lipstick shades, high heels, and a strict height requirement. While these strict rules have since been relaxed, some airlines still expect flight attendants to offer smiles alongside pretzels and safety instructions. For naturally outgoing individuals, these professional expectations align well with their personality, causing little to no negative impact. However, those who must suppress their true nature may experience adverse consequences. Research suggests that prolonged suppression of one's natural traits can be detrimental. The core idea is that suppressing emotions triggers the autonomic nervous system, and chronic activation can lead to health problems. Jamie Pennebaker's research indicates that students who suppress significant personal issues, like unpleasant childhood experiences, exhibit chronically elevated autonomic arousal and more health issues compared to those who don't suppress such experiences. Interestingly, when individuals openly address these suppressed issues through writing or talking, their autonomic arousal initially increases but then decreases to levels lower than before, resulting in improved health and immune function. This phenomenon may extend to sustained free trait behavior. For instance, a naturally agreeable woman forced to act aggressively at her law firm may experience autonomic arousal symptoms like increased heart rate, sweating, and muscle tension. In a workplace culture that discourages expressing such feelings, the strain can be particularly taxing. Similarly, a musical impresario like Marcus might feel drained due to his inability to express his need for a break from the constant social demands of the music scene. Furthermore, suppressing our innate nature can lead to another complication. Dan Wegner's research demonstrates that attempting to suppress a thought, like trying not to think about a white bear, triggers ironic processes. The very act of suppression necessitates a representation of the suppressed thought, leading to hypervigilance, cognitive depletion, and the ironic reappearance of the thought. In essence, trying not to think about a white bear requires thinking about the white bear you're trying to avoid. This principle applies to acting against one's natural disposition or engaging in free trait behavior. Marcus, during a high-pressure negotiation, might unintentionally reveal his introversion through brief pauses or a slight avoidance of eye contact. Stephanie, despite her commitment to her family, might impulsively send an email she regrets later. These leakages and regrets highlight the challenges of consistently acting against one's true nature. Restorative niches, mitigating the costs of acting out of character. Can we lessen the downsides of behaving in ways that are not natural to us? One approach involves finding a restorative niche, a space where we can recover from the physiological strain of acting against our innate tendencies and reconnect with our inherent nature. A personal anecdote illustrates this point. As a natural introvert, I am easily overwhelmed and highly sensitive to social stimulation. While I may enjoy such interactions, they hinder my ability to perform effectively. For years, I lectured on personality at the Royal Military College in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, Quebec. I would drive down the evening before and spend the day with military leaders, delivering 3-hour lectures in both the morning and afternoon. A key aspect of my work is engaging fully with my audience, whether they are college students, high-ranking military officials, or attendees at my Arizona talk. To truly connect, my lectures need to be energetic, engaging, and interactive, essentially extrovert. Consequently, by the end of the morning session at the Royal Military College, I would be overstimulated, exceeding the optimal level for clear thinking and effective lecturing. The challenge then was lunchtime. Precisely when I needed to distress, the officers would invite me to the officers' mess. After a few visits, I realized this was detrimental to my afternoon lectures and devised a strategy. Instead of joining the officers for lunch, I requested to walk along the Richelieu River, which ran alongside the lecture hall. While I feigned interest in the boats on the river, my primary goal was to lower my arousal level. This worked well for a couple of years, but when the campus relocated, I needed a new restorative niche. I discovered an ideal spot, the men's room. Choosing the furthest cubicle, I would quietly reflect on life and my upcoming lecture, allowing my introverted nature to recover. One day, this safe haven failed me. While successfully distressing, I heard what sounded like an extremely outgoing person approaching. He was the loudest hummer I had ever encountered. He entered the men's room and headed toward cubicle 2. I was peering through the gaps in my door. He must have noticed my non-military shoes, because he stopped, turned, and approached my cubicle. My heart started racing. He sat down in the cubicle next to me, followed by various loud and unrestrained bodily noises. As an introvert, this was highly unusual. Many of us even flush during and after. Finally, a gruff voice called out, "Hey, is that Dr. Little?" He was an extrovert, eager to chat. If anything can cause an introvert extreme discomfort, it's talking on the toilet. My arousal level went through the roof. Unsurprisingly, after our lengthy and animated conversation through the stalls, my afternoon lecture suffered. From that point on, I adjusted my restorative niche behavior to avoid detection. So, if you looked for me during the break, you might not find me in the men's room. But I would be there, in the furthest stall, lowering my arousal level, with my feet up, toward a free trade agreement. Restorative niches aren't exclusive to introverts who are pretending to be extroverts. Similarly, extroverts who are acting like pseudo-introverts at work don't necessarily need a quiet retreat to recharge. What restores one person might be another's worst nightmare, and vice versa. They might need something stimulating to re-energize them, perhaps a vibrant nightclub experience. Reflecting on the Arizona ballroom, after transitioning into delivery mode for a lecture, I initially emphasized how fixed personality traits influence our prospects for well-being, fully embracing my pseudo-extrovert persona. However, I then introduced the concept of free traits, acting against one's natural inclinations, and the importance of restorative niches. I even jokingly cautioned the audience against following me to the restroom after the presentation. Following the lecture, I briefly chatted with attendees eager to apply the information to their families. While packing up, a man approached me, waiting for others to leave. He stated directly, "Brian, according to your personality test, I am exceptionally disagreeable." I attempted to reassure him, but he insisted on his unpleasant nature, making it clear that no amount of denial from me would change his mind. He then revealed that he had recently spent 2 weeks at his dying mother's bedside, being gentle, loving, and affectionate every day. Totally out of character, he acknowledged, echoing the lecture's terminology. "But if you're right," he continued, "then I could be paying a price. My sister and I are both grieving, but she's coping much better than I am. She's naturally pleasant, almost sickeningly so. We're both saddened by Mom's death, but I feel completely burnt out. So, what kind of restorative niche would work for me? Intrigued, I considered his question. While our initial research on free traits largely focused on extroversion and pseudo-extroversion, he was asking about the cost of behaving as a pseudo-agreeable person, not just in brief encounters, but over an extended period. I learned that he played recreational hockey and suspected that vigorous, even aggressive, games of hockey where he could really kick some but would be highly restorative for him. I believe there's a moral dimension to free trait behavior. Acting against our natural inclinations is often driven by values, love, professionalism, and fulfilling our commitments. However, it can be draining. To mitigate this, I propose a free trait agreement, an informal understanding to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to create and access restorative niches that align with their natural inclinations. This can be as simple as showing understanding and support for behaviors that might seem perplexing. For example, if a gregarious wife, after weeks of intense, solitary work, escapes for a lively weekend with friends, it's not necessarily a reflection of her feelings for her partner, but a way to recharge and return as a better version of herself. Similarly, the kind but stern internal auditor should be allowed a moment of levity to be his true self. In closing, I urge that your Big 5 trait scores shouldn't be taken too seriously. Don't allow them to confine or define you. Avoid sharing your scores with others. You are more complex than a single number or 5 numbers. Instead, focus on discussing your core projects, commitments, and aspirations. When these are central, your relatively fixed and strategic free traits are viewed in a different light. Even if you're identified as a neurotic introvert, recognize that you have more freedom than that label suggests. By acting out of character and employing free traits, you can advance the projects that are meaningful to you. Some individuals find it easy to adapt to different modes of self-presentation and adopt free traits. However, others feel authenticity is paramount. These differences profoundly impact how you express your personality and interact with others. The following chapter will help you assess where you stand on this important aspect of personality and why it matters. End of Chapter 3.